Were you taught anything about LGBTQ history in schools?
I don't think I ever have been.
No.
No.
No, not at all.
No, not really.
No, absolutely not.
No.
No, definitely not.
Do you know anything that happened to the LGBTQ community through the 60s and 70s?
The government thought that gay people were a national threat to security, which made no sense at all.
The Lavender Scare was a period of time between the 1940s and the 1970s in which hysteria created a work environment where it was routine to root out someone's sexuality. Intertwined with the Red Scare, government officials equated communism and homosexuals. Congress claimed they were a threat to national security and issued a report called The Employment of Homosexuals and Other Sex Perverts in the Government, as well as passed laws that facilitated the arrest and punishment of people who engaged in homosexual behavior. These witch hunts caused thousands of government employees to lose their jobs simply because of their sexual orientation. There were a few protests, but many of these laws were not repealed until much later. In the late 60s, raids on gay bars were common, and the solicitation of homosexual relations was illegal in New York as well as the majority of the country and the world. In the early morning of June 28, 1969, the New York City Police performed one of their routine raids on a gay bar, the Stonewall Inn. Fed up with the constant police harassment and discrimination, the community snapped, sparking a riot within only a few minutes. 1 year later, people marched the streets of New York, starting the worldwide celebration of Pride. Stonewall is known as a catalyst for the gay rights movement and is responsible for many LGBTQ organizations. During the late 60s and early 70s, gay liberation was at a high. There were hundreds of protests for LGBTQ rights, as well as key activists like Sylvia Rivera, Martha P. Johnson, and Harvey Milk.
Y'all better quiet down. I have been thrown in jail. I have lost my job. I have lost my apartment for gay liberation. And you all treat me this way?
But this high didn't last for long, for the AIDS epidemic hit the community hard.
Do you know anything about the AIDS epidemic, or were you taught about that?
I haven't been taught about it per se. I know that it happened. Most of it I've learned about with some movies and just again, it's things I've just seen online on my own.
No, I don't really know what they are, to be honest. For my parents, and that it's because of gay people.
That's an STD that gay men can get?
Not true, but that's where I've heard it from.
In the beginning stages of this epidemic, HIV and AIDS was known to mostly affect gay men and was branded as a gay disease or gay plague. The result of this was mass government neglect, in which President Reagan didn't publicly mention AIDS until 4 years after the crisis had started in the US. $36.3 million people have died from AIDS since the start of the AIDS epidemic in 1981.
This beautiful day started with trouble in Lower Manhattan. More than 100 people were arrested during a protest. Demonstrators were demanding more money in the war against AIDS. They brought rush hour traffic to a standstill. Tim Minton has details.
To combat this, ACT UP was formed. ACT UP was an activist organization that fought harmful misinformation about HIV/AIDS and advocated for safe sex precautions.
They have been ignoring us all these years, and the only way you get attention from them is to hit them where it hurts. And in New York City, of course, traffic hurts.
I've been diagnosed with AIDS-related complex for 2.5 years now, and there's absolutely no drug I can take, and I'm slowly getting worse and worse. That's why we're here, to make a point.
Now there are medical solutions for HIV and options for AIDS.
Do you think that LGBTQ history should be taught in schools?
Absolutely, I do think it should be. I think we should include everything that we can.
You're doing kids a disservice if you don't make them aware of the variety of life out there.
Well, if we teach history in schools, I don't think we can just pick and choose what types of history that are taught. So yes, I do agree that it should be presented in schools.
You can't fully understand something until you learn the history and how it became and the seriousness of it.
I think the more we normalize it at a younger age, the more comfortable they're going to be to talk about it and have conversations and to grow from it.
Some people don't, because they think it's controversial, so you just shouldn't do it. But there are ways to handle quote unquote controversial topics sensitively and to not make it so people get angry.
So the history, like I said, it's a lot of it is known, a lot of it exists. Now locally it's harder to know, but it's there if we interview people, or if people have old flyers and stuff in their attics and stuff. I mean, it's there, but it's not valued. So I do think that we need to, when we show care for these stories, when we show interest in them, when we show that they have value and significance, then absolutely, then the resources and money and time and labor will go into making sure that those stories are told.
When we get to the 60s, 70s, and we talk about the different new left movements, like the hippies and all this stuff, we do talk about it as kind of as one of those other movements. I think a lot of people just think of civil rights, but I'll mention feminism and LGBTQ movement starting, and Native Americans and the Chicano movement, the disability movement, all these things that kind of came out of the civil rights movement.
It's something that can always be there and brought out more or less. But when it comes to official curriculum, it's not something that's highlighted as much. So I think that there's a lot of potential within my subject as well to bring more of that to the forefront.
That's always kind of been my issue, is that I want to go more in depth, but we don't have the time. And so I always preface it by saying, even with the civil rights movement, I'm just providing an overview of this, and hopefully that if these are things you're more interested in, you can go and look into it.
When you have a gay group, not just gay, but a LGBTQIA, a queer group on campus, that can then be a platform where that group can then say we demand this or we demand that,